people want to keep a diary, but they don't know where to start. Or one day they feel really inspired, keep it up for a few days, lose motivation, and give up. I was one of those people until about 6 years ago, one summer afternoon, when I decided to write about what I'd done that morning. 17th of July, 2021. Since then, I've not looked back. I've written in my diary without fail pretty much until this day. I filled 6 notebooks and counting, and well, it would have been more, but the other year I started writing really small, so these 3 notebooks have actually lasted a long time. And so in this video I want to talk about what's so good about keeping a diary. The first thing is that you get to understand yourself better, and I don't necessarily mean your personality, but the way your brain works, because we're all so used to thinking about things in our head, obviously, processing everything in our brain, and when we actually sit down to write out our thoughts, well, at first it can be quite hard because you're not used to articulating everything and portraying it on paper. So when you actually do that, it's really interesting to see what happens and how you explain things, how you write things out. And I think that just helps you understand how your brain works and how you go about translating things from your head onto paper. I think that is really interesting. The second point I want to make is that it helps you rationalise your problems, your thoughts, and it helps you to realise that nothing is as serious as it seems. Because there are so many times when I've got so in my head about something, so upset or frustrated, and the minute that I sit down to write it out, I realise that it's really not that big of a deal, and I realise, why have I been getting so obsessed about this minimal problem? Because it's as if you get to see your thoughts from a different perspective, because you write it out, and in the process of writing it out you think, okay, why have I made this such a big thing in my head? I think that's really useful as well, because it's almost as if you're making something physically smaller and workable, because obviously in your head things are so abstract and they're flying about, and then when you actually write it out on a piece of paper, it becomes physically smaller, it becomes the size of the page. And also seeing it there in one place makes it look a lot less daunting and a lot less overwhelming. So writing things out definitely helps you deal with them better and realise that nothing is ever as big, as bad as it seems. Okay, the third thing I want to talk about, and I think this is more specific to me, my experience, is that keeping a diary is a really useful tool to help you learn or improve a certain skill. Because for me, when was it? In 2022, perhaps, 2023, I began writing in Spanish. So since then, every diary entry that I've written has been in Spanish. And a key aspect of journaling, keeping a diary, is that it's constant, it's a consistent thing that you're doing regularly. So for me, writing in Spanish every day for years, well, the fact that it's been consistent, it's really helped me improve my language skills, improve my writing, my spelling, syntax, how I phrase things, and really consolidating vocabulary. So even though I'm not necessarily learning anything new when I am writing my diary, because I'm not always translating using my phone. Sometimes I use a dictionary, but because I'm not always doing that, it is more consolidation really. But even that is so useful. And I guess this can apply to even if you're not writing in a foreign language. This can help you improve how you articulate yourself, your spelling, your writing, because there's just something so important, I think, about putting pen to paper. The final point I want to make, and this kind of links back to what I've just been talking about, is that there's something really important, refreshing about using an actual notebook and a pen and paper, because in this increasingly digital world, everything's electronic, everything's online. So having a space to write things out with your hand, mechanically, physically, I think is really important. And also, we're all guilty of this. Say if you spend a bit too long scrolling on your phone or using a screen in the evening, it really helps me wind down. So I shut down my phone, I get my notebook out and my pen, and the act of writing, it's linear, it's start to finish. That process really helps me wind down and kind of reverse the effects of looking at my phone for so long. And it really helps me kind of switch off. Because now I don't feel like my day is properly over, or I don't feel like I've properly processed my day if I haven't given myself that moment to journal and to write in my diary. Because oftentimes we just let the day happen to us. We don't give ourselves time to reflect, or the moment that we reflect is when we lie down in bed, and that keeps us awake and wired, and it doesn't help us sleep. So having this moment to write in your diary, that is your moment. You're giving yourself that moment to take everything out of your head, put it on the page, and to really think about your day, and I guess to stay ahead of everything and not just feel like, oh, everything's happening to me, everything's happening so quickly, and starting the next day without having properly thought about the day before. So it's definitely a really important part of my nighttime routine, and without it I would feel like I haven't had the chance to properly process the day. So that's what I think is so good about journaling and about keeping a diary. But how can you be consistent with it? How can you do it every single day without giving up within 2 weeks? Well, I think the most important thing is to make it doable for yourself. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to make every single page really beautifully laid out, aesthetic, beautiful handwriting, perfect layout, because that way you're just going to get overwhelmed or frustrated every time you sit down to write in it, and you're not going to know where to start. So the first paragraph I wrote, it wasn't my nicest handwriting. I included some random sketches, if you could even call them that, and I just carried on without thinking too much about how I was setting it out, because I just didn't want to put too much pressure on myself, because I knew that way I would get really fed up really quickly. you've also got to not force yourself to be too introspective every single time you decide to write in your diary, because that way it's going to seem like too big of a task in your head, especially if you're doing it just before bed when the only thing you really want to do is go to sleep, you know? So don't stress too much about how it looks, and don't make it too detailed every single time you're writing it. There's plenty of times where I've just written a little list of what I've done in the day because I've not had the energy to write out a fully articulated paragraph. So don't stress too much about the layout, and don't force yourself to be too detailed. That way it doesn't seem too big of a task. That way it seems like something manageable that you can do every day. And that way you can be consistent and eventually have years and years of memories and a record of your life, which has helped you to become more present, helps you to understand your mind better, helps you to deal with your problems, and has given you something that you can read through when you're older and look back on everything